Hello, insatiable listeners. Well, we just finished another rich podcasting season where we looked at the various angles of inconsistency. We are now on a season break until September 18th, when we will be back with a dynamite new season. Mark your calendars for September 18th when we return. Originally, I thought our next season theme would be on fertility, but it's taking some interesting twists and turns. So it's kind of about that and kind of not. Regardless where you are in your menstrual or parenting cycle, next season will get you thinking and ahawing about how the cycle of life influences our food habits and choices, and how we need to harmonize our food and wellness based on where we find ourselves hormonally, emotionally, and spiritually. In the meantime, I hope those of you who feel the call will join us in my live Why Am I Eating This Now group program, which opens for registration on August 5th. Truly, this program is life-changing, and it's the last chance to work with me until March 2020, because I am going on a 6-week maternity break from whenever this bambino is born until 6 weeks out. And my private practice is full until April 2020. So you can find details for the Why Am I Eating This Now live group program, which again, it only runs once a year, at allyshapiro.com/why-am-I-eating-this-now-live-group. Okay, and now on to a rebroadcast of some previous Insatiable episodes where a second listen is worthwhile. Enjoy.
Speaking to what you said about the gut and healing the gut, there's definitely how long it takes for the initial healing depends on how bad it is, and how sick you are, right? And so that's the first thing for sure. I say 6 months to 2 years, depending, if you stay on a very gut healing program and eat gut healing foods. And so there is a food piece to how you want to eat long term. And what's lifelong, the interesting thing that is that there's a lifelong piece to this, because to have a healthy gut, you have to eat a food plan, a food program. I don't like calling it a diet. It's making food choices that facilitate a healthy microbiome. Conventionally, every autoimmune disease has been split between different medical specialties, chopped up. So the neurologists are studying MS, and the rheumatologist is studying rheumatoid arthritis, and the endocrinologist takes care of the thyroid people, and the gastroenterologist takes care of the Crohn's and colitis people, and so everybody's in a different place. And so the money for research and the unification of it all, what's really happening is it's an immunology problem. There's a problem with the immune system. And so in functional medicine, the approach in functional medicine is to try to figure out the root cause of autoimmunity, right? What's the root cause? Why is the immune system not working right?
Battling food in your body doesn't work. You want to love and accept yourself. And because you're insatiable, you want results too. You bring the same intensity to your life, wanting to maximize your time, potential, and experiences you have here on our beautiful and wondrous planet Earth. Fair warning, it will be a roller coaster. But for those insatiable, this is your prime time to thrive. Here's to saying yes to the hunger of wanting it all. I'm your host, Allie Shapiro, who is dedicated to pioneering a saner and more empowering approach to health and weight loss. Welcome to episode 83 of the Insatiable podcast with Dr. Susan Blum, functional medicine pioneer on healing your gut for chronic disease relief. Most of today's chronic health issues, from psoriasis to depression to Hashimoto's, stem from an autoimmune response in an unhealthy gut. For 2 decades, Dr. Susan Blum has been providing relief to her patients by getting to the root of their chronic illness through a groundbreaking whole-body approach that, with precision, addresses the physical and emotional roots of these issues. In today's episode, I get the scoop from Dr. Blum on the most effective testing to see if you have gut issues and how this test is also a tool to feeling relief you didn't know was possible. And this is important because not all gut issues show up in your digestive system. We'll talk about the nitty-gritty details of gut healing, including expected timelines, when pre and probiotics make sense, and how you don't have to eat perfectly to be able to get relief. And lastly, we talk about how much stress influences gut issues and how much weight you should give to stress relief in relation to dietary changes. The percentage will surprise you. This also led to a great discussion on Dr. Blum's own spiritual anchors and beliefs that guide her, including her own health challenges she recently had and recovered from. Here's a little bit more about the amazing Dr. Susan Blum. She is a true functional medicine pioneer and is an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Preventive Medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. In addition to being a specialist, she is the founder and director of Blum Center for Health in Ryebeck, New York, where she leads a large multi-special team of physicians, nurse practitioners, nutritionists, and health coaches, all providing cutting-edge functional and integrative medicine services. In her first best-selling book, The Immune System Recovery Plan, Dr. Blum offers her 4-step program, which she used to help thousands of patients recover from autoimmune and immune-related conditions without medication. She'll have a second book coming out this fall called Healing Arthritis, which offers a unique, groundbreaking approach to helping arthritis sufferers reverse and even heal this program. And we talk a little bit about on the podcast today. She's a member of the Medical Advisory Board for the Dr. Oz Show, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and a senior faculty teacher with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C. And she's been seen all over the media on the Dr. Oz shows, Fox 5 News, ABC Eyewitness News, and is regularly quoted in Real Simple, Harper's Bazaar, and Red Book, among other publications. Believe it or not, she has even more credentials, which you can get at my website, alishapiro.com/podcast. But you're going to love today's episode. It's really going to reframe how you think about health, including how to prioritize your emotional well-being. Enjoy. Welcome, insatiable listeners. Today we have such an extra special guest, Dr. Susan Blum. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Blum, I was telling my Truth with Food group that I was interviewing you, and one of my clients was like, oh my God, her protocol saved my life. It sounds so cliche, but I was at the darkest hour, and she gave me so much hope. And her psoriasis, so many of her autoimmune conditions are healing. And so that's kind of the intro I want to give our listeners, like this woman of miracles.
Well, thank you so much. That's really nice.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So you are kind of you're a real pioneer in adopting functional medicine, and you had your own Hashimoto's experience. So, but what I find interesting was that you were board certified in preventative medicine before Hashimoto. So you always had this inkling. And so I'm curious how that transition happened and how you knew to look at food in terms of your Hashimoto's and other autoimmune issues.
Well, so again, thank you for having me here. I really I love hearing stories about how my book or listening to me or hearing me or seeing me speak gave people hope, because that's what I hope to do today. Just give more information and offer another way, just to share what I know and to help give people hope that they don't have to suffer, especially with any kind of complex chronic illness, that there is another way and you can get to the root cause and treat it. And food is one of those things. Now, how did I learn? And it's interesting, so many of my colleagues, when I give a talk at integrative conferences, and I always start out and say, okay, how many of you came to this field of medicine because you had your own autoimmune issue or your own health issue, or how many of you figured this out because you yourself had a problem? And at least 2/3 of the audience raises their hand. So we figure this out on ourselves first often, and it's what brings us to an opening. Now, you're right, I was already on the path a little bit beforehand, because I was already dissatisfied with conventional internal medicine, which is where I started out. I started out in internal medicine. I did my internship, and I just thought, this isn't right for me. This is like there's a heart attack in room 12 and a GI bleed in room 14, and there was some algorithm for how to treat them. And it's what we call downstream medicine. It's like way downstream. It's when everything's happened and you're seeing the end result. And I now know the term for it. It's called upstream medicine, was what I really wanted to practice. But at that time, the only thing I could find, I said, I want to have an influence in how they got here. Like, I want to talk to people. I want to help figure out, sort of change the story before they're sitting in the room with the heart attack. And the only field that was available was sort of this field of preventive medicine, and also a master, which is taught in public health schools. There's a preventive medicine track in public health schools, as well as there's actually a very and I actually just came this morning from at the Icahn School of Medicine in Mount Sinai. They changed their name, but at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City, I'm on faculty in the preventive medicine department because that's where I did my residency, and we had our residency advisory committee this morning, and so I just came from there. And as a matter of fact, but I really wanted to find a way to do upstream. I was interested in nutrition and stress, and so let's do that. And the conventional world where I found that, I went and did my master's in public health at Columbia, and that was great. It was interesting. There was prevention programs and corporate wellness programs they were talking about, but there was still no clinical prevention. And so I found a preventive medicine residency, and I did that at Mount Sinai, which is where I'm still affiliated. And that was about immunizations and mammograms and early detection. That's not really primary prevention. Those things, screening programs, are secondary prevention. It's after you already have the beginnings of an illness, let's catch it early, and then we could treat you and you could have a better outcome. And that's all wonderful. But true primary prevention is root cause medicine. And there was nothing. So I'm in my preventive medicine program, and I'm finishing up, and I happen to have had a baby. So I had a child. It was actually my third kid. I was having children all along the way. And I said, you know what, this isn't for me either. This isn't it. I'm still looking. And so I took time off after having my third kid. And what happened for me was the first thing, so I was already, sometimes you just sort of know what you don't want as opposed to really truly knowing what you do. Isn't that true?
I think that's how you figure out what you want.
Exactly. And so I was just doing all these things and figuring out what I didn't want. And in my second year of maternity leave, or taking a break, after having kids, across my desk came this invitation, sort of a brochure for the Center for Mind-Body Medicine training program for health professionals. And I looked at this thing and I said, I have to go. I just knew I had to go. And this, of course, appeals to the whole stress part, which we're going to talk today about mind, body, and stress and emotions and how it affects health. And that was actually the first thing that I did before I had Hashimoto's or was sick, was I started out in mind, body medicine. And in that program, there was nutrition discussion. There was nutrition lectures and nutrition discussion. Food is medicine. And the Center for Mind, Body Medicine actually has a fabulous annual food as medicine conference that they run for people who want to come. Anybody could go. It's health professionals a lot who go, but really it's open to the public, and it's called Food as Medicine. So I started to learn about food as medicine, and in that program I learned about the Institute for Functional Medicine. And in 2001, 1998, I did mind body medicine, and then after doing that for a few years, which really gave me the tools to learn more about myself. And I was able to really figure out that I wanted to do nutrition next. And then I went seeking nutritional medicine training. And I think that's how that all happened. And right at the time that I was diagnosed, in 2000, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. So I went and did my functional medicine training right after my diagnosis of Hashimoto's. And I came home and I ordered every test on myself. I put myself through the detox programs. I checked my mercury. I, worked on my gut. I did stool tests. I did everything I learned in the functional medicine training. And I sort of worked it all out on myself. And so that's the whole story then, how that all unfolded.
I love that. It's because I think sometimes people think, oh, everyone knows what to do. There's a set way to do things. And it really is a lot about experimentation. And that's one of the things I was prepping for this interview. Someone asked you like, well, how long does it take to heal the gut? And you're like, oh, this is a lifetime path. Not that you're going to be in acute pain forever, but it's a constant learning. I call it a spiral staircase. Like you get to one view and then you learn something else. And then more and more, kind of like your educational and your own intuitive path led you.
Right, exactly. And there's a lifelong aspect to this that's really important. And actually, I'm happy to speak to that right now, because I have a little bug in my bonnet about that these days.
That's a great term.
I do. I have a bug in my bonnet about that, because I'm now 15, 16 years out of practicing functional medicine, and I'm grateful that I found it, or that I have the experience, right? Because I've been doing it a long time. And so many times we do these jumpstart, you can go online, there's detox programs, 21-day this, 30-day this, 2-week this, and there's a lot of jumpstart programs. And I start out with people with a jumpstart as well, because they'll feel better quickly. And you want that, you get them started. But I have a new book coming out in October called Healing Arthritis. And what I really was passionate about in this book was step 3 is called finish what you start. Finishing what you started, because healing the gut, and it's very much about healing the gut, because arthritis is the gut arthritis connection. And there's a whole section on food and a whole section on trauma. Okay, so food, trauma, gut is the whole book. And then it's leaky gut and how it causes systemic inflammation. But speaking to what you said about the gut and healing the gut, there's definitely how long it takes for the initial healing depends on how bad it is, and how sick you are, right? And so that's the first thing for sure. I say 6 months to 2 years, depending, if you stay on a very gut healing program and eat gut healing foods. And so there is a food piece to how you want to eat long term. And what's lifelong, the interesting thing that is that there's a lifelong piece to this, because to have a healthy gut, you have to eat a food program. I don't like calling it a diet. It's making food choices that facilitate a healthy microbiome. And a standard American diet does not facilitate a healthy microbiome. Too much animal does not facilitate a healthy microbiome. It's food and polyphenol. It's fiber, polyphenols, a lot of vegetables, resistant starch that's in legumes. So a lot of people, I'm not anti-paleo, but if the diet should be more 30% animal and 70% of these vegetable foods, as opposed to 70% animal. So you could always it's about balance, but there's a way to eat that will support your microbiome. And so to the finishing what you started after you're healing your gut and then you're moving on, you really need to continually, 90% of the time, eat in a way that's healing for your gut. And that's the lifelong part. Not that you need to be on a leaky gut diet, restrictive for forever. It's about maybe there's more restriction at the beginning while you're doing the intensive healing, but then you need some sanity. You need some balance about how you're going to live your life, but you have to understand the influences on your health that you want to adopt certain healthy lifestyle pieces. And, right before we got on, we were talking about how stress comes along and changes people's food choices. Well, stress comes along and damages the gut. And I see this all the time about people flare with whatever's going on in their pain or their arthritis. You see flares in diseases or symptoms that people have after something happens. And that's a very common thing as well. So learning how to become more bulletproof, to the stressors in your life is going to help you. That's a lifelong thing you need to work on as well.
I love that you said that, because I had cancer as a teenager, and I didn't realize that the steroids and the chemotherapy destroyed my gut. And when I was 22, I had a colonoscopy at 22, right? Early detection / not really, but healing my gut. I had reflux, I had IBS, depression, acne, all this stuff. And I had to be, I'm still gluten-free because my sister has celiac and I just feel amazing off of it. It's been 9 years. I'm not going back now. But the dairy, for the first couple of years, I couldn't have it. I couldn't eat past 7 o'clock at night. And now I can have dairy here and there. I shouldn't, but it's not going to kill me. And I only feel my stomach flare up once every couple of years when I'm under a lot of stress. And that's when I know I need to back off. But it's nothing compared to 10 years ago, how rigid I had to be with enzymes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it gets better. I want to back up though. You just said something I think that a lot of people are like, wait, what? Arthritis is related to the gut? And so I would love for you to define autoimmune conditions and signs and symptoms of them, because it's really hard to get a clear diagnosis if you're going to a conventional doctor. So I think a lot of people are like, arthritis is connected to my gut, right?
Yes. Well, yes, I'm very happy to do that. And so the end first, just about arthritis connected to the gut, and then I'll back up, I promise. There's a lot of research. And if you're rheumatologist, if you have arthritis and your rheumatologist doesn't know that arthritis is connected to your gut, then you actually should get a different rheumatologist, because this is conventional rheumatology journals. I read, because we're the the poor kid on the block, sort of with a new specialty. I'm probably more up on the rheumatology literature than some rheumatologists are. And because I read all sorts of journals, but even in the rheumatology journals, there's a lot of studies showing the connection between an imbalance in your gut flora, a condition called leaky gut, so let's back up. In your gut, there's 100 trillion, and this is about autoimmunity too. So arthritis, autoimmune diseases,
which are like psoriasis.
Yeah, I'll back up again. So anyway, we'll come back to the gut, I promise. So let's back up about what's autoimmunity. So your immune system, we all have an immune system, and I like to think of the immune system as sort of an army. It's like an army of cells that it's an army, and they're there to protect you. I mean, that's what they're supposed to do. They have a job, and they react when they have to, and then they're supposed to go to sleep. Like go back to like basic, and just not be so reactive. So they react, and then they turn off, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off. So what can happen? That's a healthy immune system turns on when it's supposed to and turns off when it should. And then a healthy immune system also recognizes the difference between friend and foe. It recognizes that, my cells in my body are mine and they shouldn't attack it, and because they belong to me. And it recognizes that there's some foreign thing that's come into the body, whether it's a toxin or an infection or something like, or damaged tissues, right? So your immune system clears out cancer cells. It clears out damaged tissues in the body. And so the immune system has these jobs, and it's supposed to know friend from foe. Under certain circumstances, which we'll talk about in a sec, the immune system can not work right. And what does that mean? Sometimes it turns on and attacks the body, its own cells, instead when it shouldn't. So it thinks its friend is actually a foe. And so the immune system attacks itself. It's like a self-allergy almost. And that's called autoimmune, immune against myself. And so what happens is, depending on which organ the immune system attack happens, if it's in the thyroid, you get diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. If it's in the skin, you could get psoriasis. If it's in the joints, you get rheumatoid arthritis. If it's in the brain, you get multiple sclerosis. I mean, there's multiple different diseases in all these organs. And this is actually one of the reasons why autoimmune diseases are so behind the times. In cancer, you have the American Cancer Society, which it's an umbrella for every kind of cancer. Well, conventionally, every autoimmune disease has been split between different medical specialties, chopped up. So the neurologist is studying MS, and the rheumatologist is studying rheumatoid arthritis, and the endocrinologist takes care of the thyroid people, and the gastroenterologist takes care of the Crohn's and colitis people, and so everybody's in a different place. And so the money for research and the unification of it all, which what's really happening is it's an immunology problem. There's a problem with the immune system. And so in functional medicine, the approach in functional medicine is to try to figure out the root cause of autoimmunity, right? What's the root cause? Why is the immune system not working right? Why? And so the other thing that could go wrong is it could turn on for a good reason, but never turn off, right? And then it's just renegade cells running around and attacking your tissues. A good example of that is like Epstein-Barr virus and lupus, or a positive ANA and a condition called lupus, which is a systemic autoimmune disease where your immune system attacks every cell, like all the cells in your body, because the Epstein-Barr virus is hiding. Sometimes, I'm not saying everybody has it because of Epstein-Barr virus, but like a virus can go into one of your tissues, and then your immune system is attacking that tissue to try to get at it. And actually, a good case in point is, well, this wasn't autoimmune, but in January, I got Coxsackie virus from one of my kids, and I got a terrible inflammatory thyroid thing. My thyroid went crazy. The virus attacked my thyroid gland. And that's one of the things that can happen, and you can end up with Hashimoto's. Thankfully, my Hashimoto's didn't come back, but that's just an example of, if the virus gets stuck in there and you don't clear it, the immune system can keep trying to get at it. And then it attacks your own tissue because the virus is hidden inside your cells. So there's all sorts of reasons this happens.
Yeah, you mentioned the Epstein-Barr virus. For some reason, I feel like have you heard of the medical medium? He wrote this book and he basically brings everything back to
I did hear about that.
the Epstein-Barr virus. I'm more curious why everyone believes the medical medium. I mean, I haven't read the book, but it's like this phenomenon. And he goes, it's all about the Epstein-Barr virus. And I'm just like, how do the medical medium stick more than...
Yeah, and so listen, I have Lyme people who think everything's Lyme, so I'm more moderate than that. And I tend to think, I don't think there's any way you can say that everybody has the same thing, because everybody's different.
Well, and I find, I'm kind of hot on this trail of like, if someone tells you it's very simple, it means they're new to the problem.
That's a very good saying. I like that.
Like the more you learn, the more you're like, okay, like when going off gluten changed my life in the beginning, I was like, everyone should do this. And even though I think a lot of people, by the time they come to me, it would benefit, not everyone needs, in my opinion, to follow the same diet that I'm doing. But at the beginning I was like, this is the answer. And I'm just so humbled by how complex the healing.
Right, and that the gluten-free is an important part, and for autoimmunity, it definitely is in general. But there's a lot of a whole big story to gluten, as we know. But I think, so you think that answers about what autoimmunity is? So in general, that's what autoimmunity is, and so we look for root cause. So in functional medicine, we're the whole person, instead of cutting up into specialties, it's really, holistic. We're really looking at the whole person and looking at how to connect all those dots and figure out, well, what's the trigger for the immune system? Now, it turns out that 70% of the immune system rests in the gut lining, like in the intestinal system. So in your small and large intestine, on the other, it's like a tube that's supposed to be a closed tube. On the inside of your body, right below the surface, is 70% of your immune system living in these clusters called Peyer's patches, and it's called the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And that's where your immune cells are laying in wait to develop. It's like little military bases. And as soon as they perceive a foreigner, they go to action and they replicate and they sort of mount an immune response. But the other really important thing that they make in your gut is these cells that regulate everything. They're called your T regulator cells, and they help turn things off. When your immune system turns on, the T regulators turn it off. And it turns out in autoimmunity, as well as in arthritis, the T regulators aren't working that well. And what helps the T regs work right is your gut flora. Really good, 100 trillion bacteria that live in your gut. They are like what's in yogurt, Lactobacillus bifidus, and really good studies on this. In my new book, I review all the literature on the connection between the microbes in your gut and your immune system, the microbes in the food you're eating, all that stuff, and really good research. So this is not, when conventional docs say, well, we're practicing evidence-based medicine, and I say, well, no, you're not, because you're not reading the evidence. What I'm doing is practicing evidence-based medicine, and and so the gut is really, really important. And so like the other thing I just want to say for listeners is that in addition to, so you want to have a healthy gut, microbes, right? All those bacteria. And what can go wrong, and you want to have a really good barrier function between the inside of your gut and and your body, right? The intestinal lining, it's called, needs to be a barrier. So what you bring the outside world into your mouth every day, right? That's your biggest exposure. It all comes in, by a little. And if you eat raw food like sushi, you're bringing in a lot of live little critters into your stomach, and so you're breathing the outside world in every day. There's toxins and pesticides and live things and mold on the fruit, and your gut has to sort of take care of that. And you want to have a barrier between what comes in and the inside of your body, because you don't want that all just drifting willy-nilly, just easily into your body, because your immune system will be overrun with a lot of foreign-looking things, which is what happens in autoimmunity. Because in autoimmunity and arthritis, the barrier function is damaged. The barrier of the gut, the lining gets damaged, and you get a condition called leaky gut. And that's one of the things that gluten does. So in addition to its role in just triggering an immune response in susceptible people, gluten, and the other big thing that really damages the gut lining is this compound called glyphosate, Roundup. Have you been reading about that?
Yeah. So wait, I'm so excited you're going to go into gluten. But so just if someone's experiencing autoimmune symptoms, chances
Yes.
are they do have leaky gut. Even if they're not bloated, they could be having joint pain and migraines, and their poop could be regular. But
Right, and that's a really good point. And so all my autoimmune people, let's talk about symptoms of autoimmunity and then is your gut okay? And you have to assume your gut's not. And even though I do stool testing on everybody that comes in, and people will be like, but my gut's fine. Why am I doing a stool test? I'm like, well, because I want to see what's going on. And if you have, chances are there's going to be some hidden things in there, even if you don't have symptoms. And 95% of the time, there's definitely something going on in the gut. There's definitely an overgrowth of candida or bad bacteria. These are conditions called dysbiosis. Sometimes I find parasites, sometimes a lot of yeast, and sometimes what are harmful microbes, potentially harmful microbes. And there's certain categories of microbes that can become overgrown. They're like weeds in the garden. We use the analogy of the inner garden. A lot of people use that analogy. It's helpful, because you can think of the harmful bacteria and microbes as weeds. And you need to get rid of the weeds in order for the flowers to be vibrant and healthy. You also need to have healthy soil, and that's sort of the lining and what you're feeding yourself and the environment, the microenvironment in the gut, and that's where stress and food come, right? So the terrain has to be, that your lifestyle will help the good flowers grow. And so if you have an autoimmune condition, there's some that are obvious, like you might have joint pain. But often, some people come in and they just never felt right after they were sick. They had a terrible viral illness, or travelers, something happened after they traveled. And so infections can definitely trigger a latent imbalance in the body and sort of start the process that doesn't stop. But so fatigue, really bad, feeling really tired, difficulty concentrating, and brain fog. These are signs you might have a leaky gut, in addition to, and you might not have any autoimmune markers in the blood work, when you go to your doctor. But if you don't do something, you might be on the road to ending up with something, with autoimmune issues. And so the sort of things where no one can figure out what's wrong with you, where the doctor checks you for anemia and all the obvious conventional things, and nobody can figure it out. Autoimmunity can also, especially systemic autoimmune conditions like lupus and Sjogren's and things like that, you can end up with muscle, joint pain, muscle pain, anything that's sort of chronic and doesn't go away, feeling really uncomfortable in your body for some reason, any kind of pain anywhere. And definitely like headaches, maybe, but I don't even know that headaches are so much, but I think of it more like even mood stuff like anxiety and health anxiety and brain fog and can't concentrate and really bad fatigue. I mean, those sort of things, and definitely joint pain and muscle pain. So I think those would be, the most obvious things. And sometimes people will just say, I just don't feel right. Something is not right with me.
And trust that, because a lot of times if they go to a conventional doctor, they might just say, oh, you have autoimmune. And I say, there's nothing in the blood work. And yet, I was at a cookout last night or this weekend, and it was a very traditional psychiatrist who is here in Pittsburgh. And she talked about heavy metals and how it's very rare for people to have heavy metal toxicity. And I said, well, is it rare or is no one testing for it? Because I think it's probably a lot more common. And she's like, I don't know, and I know that's part of your protocol is heavy metals. We're kind of jumping around, but my point is that a lot of conventional doctors aren't testing for this stuff. So they're going to think that they don't know what they don't know, or what they don't know what.
Right. And that also reminds me, a very common thing that happens is people come in and they'll say, went to my conventional doctor, here's my blood work, everything's good. I had my checkup, nothing, I'm good. And I look at it and I say, well, they tested 3 things, and in those 3 things, you're good. But there's about 25 other things that are part of my annual routine blood work that I don't know if you're good. But, so what they tested for, they're good. And so they'll say, my doctor didn't find anything, and so there's nothing wrong with me. Well, if they only tested for 3 things, then those things aren't wrong with you. So I think it is really important to make sure that, like you said, keep going.
With your gut, right?
Go with your gut. No, keep going. And if you know something's not right, you keep going. And at the very least, though, you can start to treat yourself. So this is what we're going to get through today, right? Is you don't need, if you can find an integrator or functional medicine doctor or something like that, great. But there's a lot of us functional medicine folks who have written books to help you get started, right? And that's sort of how you found me, and I'm here talking. But because there aren't that as much of us as there are people who need us, right? So books are a good place to start. And one of the things that makes functional medicine so amazing, from my perspective, is not only are we trying to figure out root cause, and we look at things like metals, and we have different ways of testing metals, and we look at the gut, and we have different ways of testing the gut, but we're very, very much focused on using lifestyle medicine to help as the core foundation of the treatment programs. And lifestyle medicine is what you're eating and how you're living your life, emotions, thoughts, feelings, mind, body, how that's connected, helping not only treat an imbalance that might be in that system, in the stress system, but also helping people learn tools and teaching tools for how to eat, how to have better balance in your life, and stressing why that's important,
Yeah. So let's talk about food, because you started to talk about gluten. And I also liked how and you distinguish, because a lot of people, I think a great first step for people is this elimination diet.
Yeah.
And I loved how you have talked about it as both a diagnostic tool and like a treatment.
Therapeutic. It's therapeutic and diagnostic. Yeah.
So can you explain that, and so people can have like something to start with?
Yes, exactly. So, I'll tie this into the beginning of our conversation, which was, I view what's called an elimination diet as the way we start. And we always start that way. But it's not supposed to be forever. So it's an invitation to do an experiment. And I think it's a lot easier for people to sort of adopt this, so sometimes it can be very overwhelming to look and say, oh my God, how am I going to do that? And so I always say, look, plan for it, take your shopping list, make a start date. We do it for 3 weeks. So the 3 weeks is sort of the minimum amount of time to let your immune system cool down before testing the foods again. And so the goal is to remove a list of foods that are the most triggering foods for most people. And the classic ones are gluten, dairy, soy, corn, eggs. I mean, that's the top 5. And with that, it's processed sugar, processed flour. It's quality, right? Choosing better quality oils, choosing, grass-fed organic beef. If you're going to eat red meat, look at what the animals are eating. Like, make sure that any animal food you're eating, that you're choosing, you're paying attention to what those animals were fed, because that comes into your body. So cleaning things up, right? So cleaning up the processed food and that kind of stuff. But in addition to just eliminating these food groups, so there is a certain amount and then that's lifelong. Really paying attention to your processed food consumption, as well as paying attention to the quality of the actual food you're choosing, is something that remains lifelong. And that's a permanent change that you have to start making now, because sugar is inflammatory in the body. It facilitates the growth of the wrong bacteria in your gut, as well as the feedlot animals, beef, also facilitate bad bacteria in your gut, as well as are inflammatory in the body. So those are things you want to limit. That's lifelong. That being said, the elimination diet part is testing you for food sensitivities, right? So there's a general cleanup, and then there's testing you. And that's the 21-day program where we make this list of foods that you remove. Now, the reason why we call it therapeutic and diagnostic is because because the majority of people feel better when they take those foods out. And you might not, most people will say, oh, I'm fine. My digestive system is fine. I don't have food sensitivities. Why would I grow up? I could eat anything my whole life. And so what I would invite anyone listening to contemplate is that you might not know that you could feel better. And so sometimes you take those foods out and your head gets clearer, and you're remembering people's names, and you didn't realize you were forgetting them. And, all of a sudden you're looking, your energy is great, and you're looking, and all of a sudden it's 7, 8 o'clock at night and you're still going strong, and you didn't realize, that you were getting tired at 4 or 5 o'clock, like things all of a sudden you might not realize that you really could actually feel better, or that you're having better elimination and you didn't realize it could be better. all those things sort of can happen. And so for the first 3 weeks, you eliminate those foods. And, there's really there's so many other options to eat. I mean, gluten, there's so many dairy alternatives out there. There's, coconut almond products. There's so many gluten-free options. The other thing about corn and soy to keep in mind is that one of the reasons I think probably a lot of people feel better taking corn and soy out. And I think that it's one of two reasons. Either they have a true sensitivity to those foods, or there's other aspects of those foods that are giving them trouble. So soy and corn are the highest pesticide-laden foods that we have in terms of this glyphosate and Roundup. And people have terrible digestive symptoms from just that. And they're the most highly genetically modified foods. And so GMO soy and corn, because they're genetically modified to resist the Roundup pesticide, the fields of soy and corn are sprayed with enormous amounts of Roundup because the plant is still standing strong while all the weeds are killed because the plant is bred to resist the Roundup. So those foods have an enormous amount of this compound called glyphosate, which causes leaky gut and damages your gut. And so I don't know whether it's a true soy corn allergy or sensitivity, why people feel better when they take it out and then worse when they eat it. But soy, so that's the one reason why soy and corn need to come out. The other reason is that if you look at processed food and you look at a box of macaroni and cheese, or you look at, muffin mix, I don't know, I'm picking just things off the top of my head. People that eat processed foods or just regular crackers even, like Ritz crackers, you'll see that there's corn syrup solids, and sometimes in fake proteins, there's like soy protein isolates or soy this, there's processed corn and soy in all processed foods. It sort of makes up the groundwork, of those foods. And so you're getting a lot more soy and corn than you think. And so when we ask people to remove soy and corn, they have to become a label reader all of a sudden. And all of a sudden, 80% of the processed foods from their diet come out. And the education that you're going to get when you try to take all the soy and corn out of your diet is priceless.
If you're not like, oh my God, what's happening to our food supply?
Right. It's shock and awe. And you went to IAN, and these are the kinds of things you learned at IAN and the videos, right, of the way they feed the chickens. And I mean, it's really unbelievable, the food supply. And so you have to become an educated consumer of what you're eating. You have to know what's in the food, all the ingredients. And so doing an elimination diet forces you to look at every ingredient, and you will not look at food the same. And so it's a great, you might still eat those foods sometimes, I'm sure you will, but the education you're going to get and how different you're going to feel by switching over to a whole foods diet that doesn't have lists of ingredients like that in the food, you're just going to feel a lot better.
And I want to circle back with the glyphosate. You were talking about that with gluten too. So for people,
yes,
you may not have celiac disease or gluten intolerance, but again, this glyphosate, especially if you have gut issues, you're probably not detoxing as well, which means that stuff gets stored in you. So just because you get a celiac blood test and they say you don't need to stay away from gluten, or you're fine, you're saying eliminate it for 3 weeks and then add it back in.
Are you talking about people who don't have celiac? They test negative.
Yeah, test negative for celiac.
Yeah, testing negative for celiac. So coming back to gluten then, gluten is its own story, as we know. There's so many books and everything, but gluten is its own story, and for these reasons. Gluten is associated with autoimmunity, right? It causes celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition, and gluten is associated. There's really good articles that have been written looking at the data about how gluten is associated with other autoimmune diseases as well. And so you must, anyone who has any autoimmunity needs to take gluten out because it's a trigger for the immune system. Your immune system responds to it. Now, the food supply is different than it ever was before. So there's a lot more. There's 42 gluten proteins now in the wheat, and there used to be 7. And that's just hybridization over the years. Our wheat is just different than the ancient wheats that our ancestors ate. And so there's just a lot more gluten than we're exposed to. And wheat is also doused pretty well with glyphosate, with Roundup. And so what I would say is, so that's the first thing about gluten in general. The other thing is there's something called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, NCGS. And it actually has a name now. It's called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And I think it was Alessio Fasano, who's the original leaky gut researcher, the gastroenterologist, showing the mechanism for how leaky gut happens. I think he's the one who wrote that article. Could be wrong. But a really good, really though, a bona fide new diagnosis. And it just means that because gluten comes into the body and people react to it. And part of it is a gut reaction. Sometimes it's a gut reaction, but sometimes it's a systemic reaction. It's just triggering inflammation in the body. And inflammation just means that, your immune system's reacting and it's sending out these chemicals that are zipping around the body, causing irritation. And so inflammation means redness, swelling, pain, and heat. And if you see it on your joints, you see it. It's red, swollen, hot, and it hurts. But if it's in the organs or on the inside of your body, it just impairs the functioning of that tissue. It's just an irritation that you don't feel good. And that's just how inflammation feels inside you, where you can't see it. And gluten triggers inflammation. And it triggers an immune reaction in a lot of people. And so you have to remove it to see. And so the therapeutic part is 3 weeks you take these foods out and you see how you feel. And I always tell people you might not notice that you feel better. And maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be like, I know some people come in and say, I don't really know if I feel any better. So I always invite them to hold their judgment until they start reintroducing the foods, because you might not realize you felt better until you reintroduce the food and it triggers a symptom. And so what the program's doing, the elimination diet, is it's going to taking everything out. Everything calms down in your body, right? Your immune system calms down, your inflammation levels go down, and it sort of gets you ready to have a heightened reaction when you eat the food again. So when you go back then, and let's say the first thing after 3 weeks, I miss my gluten, I want to eat some wheat, and you eat gluten a couple of times that day and the next day, and just pause and you just watch what happens. If you have gluten sensitivity, you're going to trigger an immune reaction to the body that you're going to feel. And the goal is to feel it strongly, so that you're aware of it. And that's when we talk about that it's diagnostic. So it's therapeutic to see if you feel better, but then we want to diagnose food sensitivities, and that's how you do it. And every 3 days, you reintroduce the next food on your list. If you have a reaction, you have to take the food out again and wait until the reaction goes away, and then try the next food. And you just sort of roll your way through reintroduction. I always tell people the data, this is an experiment, and the data collection happens in the part 1, but especially in part 2. And before I get off this topic and pause, because I know I'm just going on and on, I do want to just say that sometimes there are people who are going to do elimination diet and not be able to identify anything. They didn't notice a difference when I removed it, and I didn't notice a difference when I reintroduced it. And if that happens to you, then chances are you have something else going on that's just masking everything. Right? So if your gut is in really bad shape, bad dysbiosis, severe leaky gut, and you're not working on and the gut work hasn't been done yet, the healing the gut part is not underway, until you heal your gut, you might not be able to notice, you're not going to feel better even from removing foods, So sometimes that happens. If something else is going on, if you're in the middle of a viral illness or something and you do an elimination diet, you might not notice you feel better because there's outside triggers. And so a way to think of, so it's just there are other, God, I love this new way. I used to always talk about sitting on tacks, removing tacks and finding the tacks and removing them. I heard one of my colleagues say, if you're in a building and and the roof's leaking and the water's pouring inside and you're inside the building and you find a couple of holes and plug them, unless you find all the holes to plug them, it's still going to rain inside.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so food, you might have some of those holes are related to food, but while you have all this other holes in the roof, it's still raining and you're not going to be able to determine the food. So I would invite you to take a look at your gut, especially, and work on a gut healing program. I do have an online resource for you to heal your gut at blumhealthmd.com. You can go there, and I have a whole Heal My Gut program. But make sure you go back later on and do the elimination diet again, because you have to, once your gut is healed or you've done some gut healing work, go back and see whether or not to test your food sensitivities again.
I love that. So I want to leave some time so we can talk about the emotional and spiritual stuff. But so I'm just going to ask you a couple quick questions about the healing part.
It will be quick.
So when people are healing, do you recommend like pre and probiotics right away, or is there a rate of introduction, or can they just go at them, which will help restabilize that gut biome?
For healing the gut, I always recommend you start out with some sort of a weed killer. And that's just the easiest way to say it. So, and I use herbs. And so I have like favorite products, right? But they're tried and true herbs that are out on the market and that supplement companies have to clean out sort of the bad bacteria and the yeast. I use a lot of oregano. I use a lot of berberine, and I use it in products, like I like GI Microbex from Designs for Health. That's the one I use. And I have packets I use them in with oregano. And so you can find, gut clean, sort of gut cleanse sort of herbs that have things like, and I talk about this is like I give all the different kind of herbs in my book, and the Immune System Recovery Plan, that book that's out already. I have a whole healing my gut. Oh, actually, on my website on Blum Health MD, if you go to the book, the Immune System Recovery Plan page, I have a free download for the whole chapter, Healing Your Gut. So awesome. The whole chapter is a free download, and it'll talk about all the herbs. But anyway, the step one, so it'll explain to you all this, so it's all there. But so that's the quickest way. But first, so to answer your question, in functional medicine, healing the gut is a multi-stage process. The first R, it's the 5R program. So the first R is remove. And that's where you remove the foods. So that's the elimination diet. But you have to remove the bad actors that are in the gut. And that's what you need the herbs for, right? Remove the bad bacteria and yeast. So you have to do that first. It's sort of like if your garden is overgrown with weeds, you can't just plant flowers and think the weeds are going to just go away. You have to weed the garden in order to really get your good stuff in there. So that's the first thing. So treat your gut with some sort of herbal program. I always use probiotics, especially probiotics not only are great for helping restore the gut bacteria, but really food is the best thing to help you restore your gut bacteria, which we'll talk about. But probiotics have an immune function. They actually, when you take probiotics, it reduces inflammation in the body. It helps heal your leaky gut. It increases your functioning of those T regulator cells that are really important, reduces inflammation in the body. Really good studies just on people taking probiotics and how it changes your immune function.
Do you think everyone in the West, even if we're relatively healthy, should be taking probiotics given
I think if you're healthy and you don't have any immune issues, you do not need to take probiotics.
Okay.
But you need to be eating probiotic foods.
Yeah.
So you need to eat cultured foods, which is I eat coconut yogurt. I put coconut yogurt in my shakes in the morning, and so you can. I don't believe in cow dairy. I think it's very inflammatory. It doesn't agree with me. Some people can tolerate it, and yogurt is the best choice as far as I'm concerned, because dairy is on the alkaline acid spectrum. It's a very acid kind of food in the body, how it behaves in the body. And so I'm not big on dairy, but I think there's a lot of cultured milks that you can do, cultured almond yogurt, cultured coconut products, and there's fermented foods. So there's kimchi and there's pickled radishes that you can get
having a
sauerkraut, and there's kombucha. You can bring kombucha tea. And so I think that rather, if you're generally healthy, you just need to attend to your gut microbiome by eating cultured and fermented foods, which peoples all around the world, there are cultures where they have that as staples in their diets. I mean, the Middle East, they have yogurt. India, they eat yogurt. They live with yogurt. And God knows there's parasites and crazy stuff in India. I never went there. I know, I've been there, and I treat people when they come back. But I think food and fiber and colorful fruits and vegetables, they grow the good bacteria. But if you're a person that has any kind of immune issue, if you find you're getting sick a lot, even just getting sick a lot, like I get a cold all the time, probiotic is really good for that. If you have digestive issues, probiotic won't necessarily, food is going to be the first thing for reflux. And like an elimination diet is a perfect way to test to try to help your reflux, to see why you're getting reflux. Gluten and dairy, I think, are the number 1 and 2 culprits,
I was just wondering if you thought because of that terrain, I always think get the probiotics and prebiotics in there.
Yeah, so let's talk about prebiotics for a second. Food. I believe I am talking about prebiotics. Yes, prebiotics in the form of food. And that's just all your fruits and vegetables and fiber. And so, yes, prebiotics in that form. There's sort of an epidemic of this gut condition called SIBO. I don't know if you've been digging into that.
One of the functional forums I went to, they were kind of now toying with, do we not treat it and just crowd it out with all the good stuff? Because this was in New York 2 years ago. I don't know if you were at that one, but they were saying
I've been there. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Sometimes the antibiotics can be worse if the terrain isn't really strong in the body. And they were postulating the question of, do we treat SIBO or do we just try to crowd it out with all the good stuff?
Right. Well, sometimes SIBO, so just what SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, normally 90% of the bacteria is supposed to be in the large intestine and only 10% in your small intestine. So that's the normal spread in the intestines. SIBO is when you might have normal bacteria, but they're just congested up in the small intestine right after your stomach. They're in the small bowel where they shouldn't belong. And those are people who have bloating and gas and just respond. The foods they eat trigger all these reactions because all these bacteria are there where they shouldn't be, ready to ferment those foods and make gas. Those are normal bacteria for the colon, often, right? So often they're just your normal flora, they're in the wrong place, and they're overgrowing and you have too much of them. And the problem is that they can cause digestion and absorption issues in the small intestine. You can get malabsorption of your nutrients from having SIBO. And some people, gosh, I've had some patients who couldn't leave their house because they were passing so much gas and they were having so many like loose stool. There's some people have diarrhea from it. Some people have constipation. And I've had some people who were so uncomfortable that they needed treatment. But I agree with you. Some people, and then I have some people where the SIBO is contributing to their leaky gut and they will have autoimmunity or arthritis and they have SIBO. And so in those cases, I do go ahead and treat them. People who are asymptomatic, like have no symptoms, and our immune systems always seems okay, sometimes we'll let that and not do any kind of aggressive treatment because conventionally they're treated with antibiotics. I use the same herbs for SIBO that I use for dysbiosis. So I'm not really, causing any damage. But what I want to say is from root cause medicine, which is functional medicine, you have to figure out why someone has SIBO. Why do you have SIBO? Right? So the answer is to find out why you have it. Otherwise, it'll still keep coming back. And sometimes the biggest culprit is stress. And I know we need to dig into stress a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes the biggest culprit is stress.
Yeah. One more question on the physical piece of the physical stresses. When someone's healing and they're getting better and better, and then they have a slip up, I mean, what's your philosophy on that? I'm kind of like, okay, use that as a reminder of how bad you feel and to keep going. And like you said, real life. But I'm curious, I tend to think like a little bit of inflammation isn't as bad as like the whole cake, right? Like a little isn't.
Oh, absolutely. I think that if as their coaches, you're a coach, I'm a coach also while I'm doing everything, but I'm coaching, right? And my job, like your job, and I know you believe this, we talked about this before, is to meet people where they are. And you can't, if you hold such a high bar and tell people you expect them to be 100%, not only will they feel like they failed, and when that happens, sometimes they just give up. And they throw the whole towel in and just don't even, and just come back and say, I just gave up because I couldn't do it. And sometimes they won't come back and see you because they feel ashamed because you gave them this whole sort of expectation that was unrealistic. And so I encourage people to be 100% if they can for the 3 weeks of the elimination diet, because you need to be 100% for us to be able to collect the data, right? You're not, if you cheat along the way, you're not going to be able to see if the food triggers you after 3 weeks. When the reintroduction part of after the 21 days are up, the reintroduction part is not as effective. You can't really know if you have a food sensitivity unless you really are 100% for 3 weeks. So that's the only time when I'm really, and if people come back and they say, I really couldn't do it, I'm like, fine. So we won't have that information. We just don't know, because, that's, and I try to encourage them at some point maybe to try again. But coming to what you said, you're not going to throw it all away if you go to a wedding like I did on Saturday night and eat whatever you want. You're not going to. And you have to live life and have fun. Oh God, I was so hungover on Sunday. I felt so sick. Okay. And I had French fries. I mean, I really ate everything. I mean, I'm way down the road on this, but the trick is to not do that too often, because then your whole baseline can start going up again. One day like that, and you'll just really feel crummy. The next day, you have to be clean, clean, clean. I actually, Monday and Tuesday, I did a juice cleanse, for 2 days. And of course, I'm involved with this company called Organic Farmer, and so I there's all 100% organic, low sugar. I help design with the chefs, all the food, and so I know that they're really good, clean, juices. But I rebooted myself, to get back on track, and to just clean that out, and to make sure that I didn't continue. So one night is fine every couple of weeks, or even, it depends on how far along you are in your process. If you're years and years and years and you're generally healthy and feeling good, it could even be a little bit once a week, and that's fine. Saturday nights, go out to dinner, cheat a little bit, but you have to go back to being really good, to really maintaining your vigilance on the other days, because you can slip back into bad habits very easily. So I definitely allow the 90% rule after they're healed. Okay. So you can't, the 90%, and so.
What about in the healing phase though?
Right. In the healing. Yes. I was going to say, so where are we with that? So it depends on I guess I just have to say it depends on how sick you are, for people listening. If you're really, really sick and you're suffering, you really want to be as close to 100% as you can, because you'll feel better. You don't want to take the chance of not feeling good, but you'll know. And so this is a bit of a process, right? So you'll know that you can test yourself as you go. So let's say you start a program and 3 months into it, or after the 21 days, you reintroduce and you realize that gluten and dairy and corn are the 3 foods that give you, like, your hands swell the next day. Or I had a patient whose feet, she couldn't get, she had terrible pain on the bottom of her feet when she stepped out of bed in the morning, right? Corn was the culprit. And you realize that you identify a food trigger. You want to remove those foods as best you can for 3 months, right? Now, if you eat that food, you're going to notice, and you probably will. So let's say you go out and you have some gluten or something. See what happens, and you might find that while you're still in the early phases of your healing, you're going to have symptoms for 3 days from cheating. Well, I don't even want to call it cheating, from eating foods that you're sensitive to. You might have symptoms for like 3 days. Whereas now, for me, I'm years in, I'll just have symptoms for a day, And so that's a sign that I have more resilience in my body. My terrain is in a better place. I'm not as sensitive to that food as I once was. And so your food sensitivity will get better as your gut gets healthier and as you move your body to a healthier overall place. And so I would say that at the beginning of your journey, you want to not try to limit the time, really restrict the food as much as you can, and slowly but surely you can see how you feel each time you eat it, to see how bad your reaction is. And if it stays pretty bad, then you need to still cut it out. How's that for an answer?
I love that. And I think this is a great bridge to the stress, because in my work, I see how emotional stress, people know they're feeling better, but then they also don't know how to cope with the emotional stress in their life. And so I see it a lot about emotional safety. So it's like, I know I'm going to feel physically bad, but risking my emotional safety right now feels worse. I mean, this is all unconscious until it's brought conscious. But you were saying stress is so important. And I'm curious about your beliefs around how much of, especially autoimmune, which I always look on an emotional level, what's the metaphor here, right? How are we emotionally attacking ourselves? If the body's physically attacking ourselves, how much, we've spent a good portion on the food, and I feel like that is something concrete for people, right? So that we want to grasp onto that. But you also, like you said, cut your teeth in mind-body medicine. So what is your view on equal weight to the emotional and spiritual? And my client who, and totally, you've changed her life, she's like, I want to know, because I've also noticed as I deal with the ghosts from my pasts, things seem to get better, even if the food is still a little wonky. And so she's like, I'd love to know what Dr. Blum thinks.
Well, I actually think there's probably equal weight to both. Mm-hmm. And I have so many stories in my head that I could share. I I find that people flare, I find my patients flare with symptoms when they have stressors and anything traumatic or difficult, just a parent gets sick and ends up dying, and all the progress, the gut goes wonky again. I mean, the stress has a huge effect on the gut. But I hear what you're saying about stress influences your food choices. It influences, you want to choose those comfort foods. You don't want to. I just actually had one of my Sjogren's patients I've been working with for a while. I spoke to her yesterday, and her husband was so sick for so long, and she's still stuck with like really taking good care of herself. And that now her daughter has an abusive husband, and she's going through that, and she said, my symptoms are flaring again, and I'm just been eating off the wagon. I can't do it anymore. I just lost it, and so
her resilience was probably so, like, it was there, but it was depleted at the same time.
Her resilience she wasn't completely resilient yet, but the stress I was surprised that she stayed so well during the first traumatic thing that she went through with her husband. And so you have to, I guess for people listening, the message really is I want you to understand the importance of what you're going through and how that's affecting your physical body. And just give it a nod, just understand that, and when I give lecture, like I now, one of the things I always say is, okay, who here knows that stress is really important? And everybody raises their hand. And then I say, well, so who here really knows and is really doing something about it? How are you emphasizing this with your patients? How are you doing this with yourself? Are you really attending to the issue of stress in your life? And like a quarter of the people raise their hands. So we all know it intellectually. And it is really, really that important. And so I think that we have to really put a practice into our lives that, well, it's more than that. It's about cultivating some way every day to have a daily practice of some sort to turn the stress off. So there's two aspects to the mind-body connection and the effects of stress on your health. One is the actual physical response of your body to a stressor, right? So there's stressors are around us. Somebody gets sick, a kid calls you at 3:00 in the morning at the police station. I had that. I have 3 sons. Each one did that to me once.
That's how resilient your gut was, right?
Nothing, but that's a stress response. So, we have, and there's all sorts of reasons why everybody is going to have traumatic things happen. Everybody's going to have stressors happen. And those of you and people with autoimmune disease or any kind of chronic illness, look, you went through something really stressful. It's very, very hard you have to acknowledge, like I acknowledge for people all the time that, they come out of that almost like a PTSD with health anxiety. I mean, everything becomes a worry. And so there's always opportunity. There's plenty of opportunity of stressors in our lives. And then the question is, how are you going to live in a perpetual on switch where your stress response is the fight or flight, they call it, right? The fight or flight system is activated and stays on all the time. I guess that's when you think of the immune system, autoimmunity, the immune system staying on, well, you could have your stress system just staying on. You need to find a way to regulate it and to turn it off. And so everybody has to, and this is a conversation I have with everybody in my office, every time I see everybody. So what are we doing? How's your mind-body practice? What have you decided to do? And sometimes I give them links to apps, and we brainstorm. If you commute on the train, you can listen to your app. And, like, what would you like to do? Do you want to do something more moving? Do you want to do yoga? Do you want to do meditation? And I give them resources for learning. I give CDs. I give downloads we have a Learn to Relax kit on our website, that on my website that, has a MP3 guided thing. It's that important. So the first thing is recognizing that it is that important, staying in the on switch and accepting that it's part of everybody. And we all have to find a way. You cannot get around this. You will stress in your life. If you allow your stressors to come into your body, they will make you sick. They will affect your immune system. They can cause other symptoms other than autoimmunity, but it can contribute to that, and triggering inflammation. And then indirectly, because physically, stress will damage the gut. It causes leaky gut all by itself, stress hormones. It changes your gut flora all by itself. It causes reflux. It causes SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because it decreases the motility of your gut. It's like if you have chronic constipation or lack of motility through the gut, the bacteria get jammed up in the small intestine. And so stress is a huge component to that. So there's all sorts of ways that I can go through and prove, and we can all understand it intellectually. But, as coaches, right, we have to not only walk the walk ourselves. I meditate every morning, but like I walk my dog, I leave the phone home, I go out with the dog. And so, you have to set an intention that this is that important, and you won't get better. And so sometimes in somebody's healing journey, they're getting better, and we're working on healing the gut, and the stool tests are improving, and everything's going great. And there's some reason that they're not, using a football metaphor, you're in field goal range, but you're not in the end zone yet, no touchdown. What's that last piece? And 90% of the time, it's stress. There's that emotional piece, they're falling into some emotional eating, or they're falling into there's just stressors that they're just bringing in that are preventing them from full recovery or full health. The other thing that mind-body medicine does, or these mind-body practices like meditation, so they're going to help antidote and give you the bulletproof vest, right, for your physical health. But they also provide tools for self-awareness. We all are, I was going to say we're all alone. I mean, we're not all alone, but you know what I mean? Like we all are in charge of our own health. We're all in charge of our path through life. It's a journey where each individual is on. And how do you know what comes next? How do you know how to navigate? How do you know what choice to make with a health decision you might have? How do you know? And I believe we all have an intuition, right? There's an intuitive voice that helps us all know what to do next. Decisions, whether it's about health or family or anything. And finding some practice every day or some way to quiet your mind so you could get in touch with your own intuitive voice, which is what happens when you quiet the noisy mind that's busy talking to you and making just a lot of distraction. These practices, these meditative mind-body practices, can help quiet your mind so you can hear your inner voice. I call it your inner North Star. And in order to navigate through our healthcare system, through getting better from having chronic illness, what comes next, being able to notice when your emotions are getting the better of you, and you're making those choices. And sometimes you say, damn it, I'm just going to eat that anyway. I know I'm making an emotional choice. I don't care. I feel like having it. And I believe you should eat it then. I'm like fine with that. But it's still coming back. Somehow you have to reground yourself, and you need tools for that so that you don't completely fall off, and that you're mindful as you're doing it. So mindful choices. And so it's been my experience that to really, really stay on the path and finish what you start, the mind-body piece and understanding your own sort of the way your own emotions and mind works to trigger food choices or to trigger your symptoms or to trigger stress responses. You have to understand that, and you have to understand it. You have to acknowledge with yourself the importance of it in your health, and you have to commit to doing something about it.
I love that you brought up the self-awareness piece, because what I do with my clients is show how stress from the past, they're recreating their story today. I always use the quote made famous by Erin Brockovich and Gloria Steinem that says, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." And how they're recreating stress. And they have to become self-aware of how they're doing that. Mm-hmm. And then you can make a new meaning out of your health symptoms, and it can be this invitation into power and resilience. And I'm curious for you is, do you think with your Hashimoto's, it was almost a spiritual redirection or fine-tunement of your path? And I find it interesting that then you got a virus at the beginning of this year, but it didn't take you down the same way because you had all this emotional resilience because you're on your North Star path.
Right. Well, I do want to clarify one thing about that. So just so that I'm for complete transparency about my path, we'll do that first. I actually got about a year ago. I'm back to resilient now because I did about 2 years ago. I got a little arthritis, and I panicked. And I was like, oh my God, actually it was that I developed this inflammation in my eye. I got an inflammatory thing. And I was like, what's going on? Now, I had written a book. One of my kids had a traumatic brain injury. I mean, we're talking about, this is my own experience of going through several terrible, difficult years. And one of my kids had to leave school and take a gap year because he was having some emotional, stress. And the other kid, and I opened Blum Center, and I was doing way too much in addition to having these family issues. And a year into this whole thing, I got this inflammation in my eye. And it was a wake-up call for me, and I realized I was having swelling in one of my fingers, and I put myself back on the program like 150% strict. I mean, like I picked, peppers out of the food. Like I was just eliminating, and I took out nightshades because of my arthritis, which is tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, and peppers. And I went about healing my gut and meditating every day and recommitted. And so, yes, when I got the virus now, I was back to being resilient, but I did fall off the wagon, so to speak, from stress. So I really do, in terms of my gut went completely wonky because of everything I had gone through. I was still eating very healthy. So it's speaking to what you had said about, I think you said this earlier, that eating fine, but you could be doing the food plan just fine and really being clean with your food, but stress alone can cause autoimmunity or can cause a leaky gut and can be the only culprit. And it absolutely can. And that's what happened with me the second time around. So I didn't have an autoimmune thing. Even with when I say I had arthritis, it was not autoimmune, but I had these inflammatory symptoms. So I caught myself early, got myself back on the wagon 100%. And really, I needed to heal. I needed to do gut work, and I needed to really do some self-awareness. I started doing acupuncture every week. I really worked on my stress system, like with help from, with a therapist, like an acupuncturist, and really committed to, because I got scared. I could end up with rheumatoid arthritis, and that's the last thing that I needed. And so I did. And so when I had the virus this year, I did recover very quickly and didn't end up with something, but I had already, so yes, I'm back to being resilient again, thank God. But I did have another thing that I did have to go through, and it was all stress related.
But I would still think, though, it went from like bouts of it, whereas Hashimoto's is full-on systemic. So even though,
right,
you don't have any more bumps in your health, it just means,
right. It was a bump, right? It wasn't like the Hashimoto's.
Yeah, because you had built up all this like principal interest and
right. No, that's very true. So yes, the Hashimoto's, exactly. I was very resilient coming into everything I was doing. And then I went through all these things, and I did have like a little bump that surfaced, but I was able to treat it, pretty quickly because of the resiliency, I think, of all the years of being very, taking good care of myself.
Seeing how miraculous the body is and your own amazing stories, what's your spiritual beliefs? What do you lock into when times do get stressful? I'm always interested because I think of you as a healer, and there's a mystery.
There is mystery. I guess, let me think of, how I would answer that would be to say that I believe that we're all here for our own reason, and that there's and that I'm here to learn lessons, like being a human being. I believe in reincarnation. I believe in coming back and learning and spiritual growth during your lifetime. And so when these things happen, I take it really seriously that I need to understand the lessons that I need to learn from it. And so, I do a lot of spiritual work too. So.
I love that, because I believe in reincarnation, but I'm going through a phase where I'm kind of questioning it, and I don't know.
Well, but there's all different ways. All it means is that, you believe that there's some place, your spirit leaves somewhere and goes somewhere, and it's a great mystery about where your spirit goes at the end of life, and that it comes back, and that I am a spiritual being inside a human body, and we come back. And I do believe, my belief is that we do choose some of the circumstances before we come in to this life. So everything that I'm going through in my life, in some ways, I'm here. I knew the lessons that I would be facing, to potentially learn in this lifetime. And so I just tried to step up to the plate and sort of dig into that. It's like, okay, well, what do I need to learn here? And the nice thing about that approach is that it releases judgment and blame and it allows forgiveness, because the most important thing, I guess that's my spiritual belief, is forgiveness, because, people, this is the circumstances that they were born into, and sometimes they're not going to learn their lessons in this life, and you just have to let it go. And there's no blame or judgment. And, some people are really trying to learn their lessons and grow from their experiences. And some people, I have family members who I think are just sort of stuck, and they're not going to learn their lessons, and you just have to go, okay, And so I do the best I can to learn, to take responsibility for my own life and to encourage everyone else to do that. And I'm not responsible for other people's lives. But we're here to learn. We're here to learn and grow. So I'm always looking for the silver lining around around everything.
Well, I love that, because for people who listen to Insatiable frequently, I talk a lot about agency, and I feel like agency is an important health metric. And what you're doing is making the choice to make something really stressful a meaningful experience. And so you're actually putting you're choosing what the meaning is. And I think that's so powerful, because then you can come out stronger than before you went in, rather than it taking you down that rabbit hole. And I think that's really important for everyone. If you're struggling with autoimmune or whatever, this could be a really big invitation into a lot of growth. And you can choose to make it that if you follow your gut, like you're saying. One more question. It's kind of less spiritual, but do you think with people who are inflamed and struggling with autoimmune, exercise, is there because movement is important, but do you think too much exercise throws them over the edge? Or
that you don't know that for each person. I mean, I would just say people should only do what they feel like they should do, but they should get up and move if they can. We say motion is the lotion.
I like that. I've never heard your issues.
Motion is the lotion for especially joints, so you really want to move. It is going to help you feel better. I mean, that's like the fibromyalgia, arthritis people for sure. But I tell my people who are so tired that let's work on the fatigue, first, and try to help you feel a little bit better from that. I'm not going to push you for exercise, but at least try to walk 2 hours a week. And just get up and walk, go for a walk, even if you can. So I do think movement is important, and it helps detox your lymphatic muscles. Sort of help move the lymphatics, which will help with your blood flow and your lymphatic flow, which helps clear the debris out of all your cells. And so you got to move. But the amount of exercise, absolutely no overdoing it. If you're really sick, there's no need to over-exercise. But aiming for just 2 hours total a week of walking and some sort of movement would be a good place to start. So yeah, absolutely not.
Okay, yeah, I love that. So it's like tune into that North Star as best as you can with
right, and do what your body wants. Tune into your body, but that's why you have to have some way of quieting your mind. Look, for some people it's knitting, or needlepoint. It doesn't have to be meditation, if that's not true, quote unquote, like just sit and like and not know what to do, but sit and close your eyes. You need it. Most people that want to learn meditation, which I encourage you to do, you need a teacher. My cousin's a Zen Buddhist. She taught me how to meditate Zen. And then I went to meditation retreats. I recommend people go to places like, well, you live in, where are you?
Pittsburgh.
But, there are places all over the country that you can find to go to. I'm in New York, so I go to like Omega Institute. I spent every summer for 10 years, I went for a workshop there, and it was some sort of I did 2 meditation retreats there. It's a Vipassana, insight meditation training. I've gone to Kripalu, which is in Massachusetts. I mean, there's just places you can go, and all communities have, spiritual workshops, yoga kind of places you can learn these things. So most people do need a teacher, and that's really good. And so these practices will help you learn to be your own guide, which is what we all need.
Did you do the 10-day silent Vipassana?
I've never done that. But last summer I went and I did a spiritual retreat in Northern California with, her name is Gangaji. She's like a guru kind of a retreat. And that was a 5-day silent retreat. And that was great. Oh, I love that. You see, I've been meditating a long time, but for me who lives such a noisy life, and you can hear from how fast I talk, I'm a New Yorker, I'm busy, I'm talking, I actually crave the silence. Like going and being silent is like heaven for me. So to be able to spend that time just with myself is giving me the space that I really enjoy. So I like that. But I've also been meditating for since I'm 35. 20, how old am I now? It's 20 years I'm meditating. So I'm comfortable with that, and I like it. I enjoy. I sit down to meditate, and it's like, So and everyone can get that. It's a practice, though. You have to practice it.
Yeah, it's just so refreshing. I know our listeners to hear a physician say, go on a meditation, or that stress matters as much as what you eat. And I just thank you so much I think that channel has enabled you to pioneer and give us, all of us, you've thrown the rope back to say, hey, or the bridge, you're building the bridge back for your colleagues and everything, and all of our listeners. And I just thank you so much for your time. I know we went a little bit over. I could ask you like 1,000 more questions.
We'll come back. I'll come back and we'll do it again.
Good.
Yeah.
But tell everyone again the name of your book and the website where.
Okay. Yep. So my website is blumhealthmd.com. And we have free downloads of all sorts of information on there. So you can tool around and look what's going on there. I do Facebook Live. And I have a lot of YouTube videos. You can go find me on the YouTube channel. I've done so many topics in Facebook Live. So there's a whole library of me talking on different topics. So that's another place they can find me. My book's The Immune System Recovery Plan. That's a couple of years now. And my newest book is in October. And we're going to be I'm actually hosting an arthritis summit, which is a free online I'm interviewing all my colleagues in functional medicine about arthritis. And that's going to be in October as well. So a lot going on, but I think there are all sorts of places to find me. Facebook, I have I'm very active on social media as well.
Wonderful. And in the show notes, we'll have Dr. Blum's website and background and everything. So you can also find it there. Thank you so much for your time and for your willingness to go against the grain.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for
recommending grains.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. And
we definitely have to have you back.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely happy to come back.
Great. Thank you. Have questions or reactions about the episode? Reach out to me on Instagram and Twitter at Allie M. Shapiro or Facebook at Facebook.com/Allie Marie Shapiro. And if you love the show, please leave an iTunes review and tell one friend this week about how to get the Insatiable podcast on their phone. See you on social media.